Welcome back to Incremental, the continuous improvement podcast. I'm Devin Bedoni.
And I'm Uriel Eisen.
And we are doing part 2 of our 2-part episode across 2 weeks, where we focus the second episode primarily on shop improvements. And Uriel has a quote.
Yes. Act your way to a new way of thinking instead of thinking your way to a new way of acting. From John Shook. This is sort of the idea of rapid prototyping. It can be very easy to have a lot of meetings and have a lot of, I feel like the way we sin here is by calling each other and talking about ideas.
Uh-huh.
Right. And then the second you build a prototype, whether that's a spreadsheet, whether that is physically moving pieces of cardboard around on a table to simulate a job. Just very quickly, you learn a lot more in a much shorter amount of time by actually doing something.
Yeah.
And I think the mistake people run into is their idea of doing something is basically doing a complete build, essentially a V1, rather than what is the biggest risk and what piece of this can we build like now and try. I mean, there's a funny one in UX that people always skip because it's tempting to skip and it just seems so crazy to do, which is drawing different screen states of an app on on paper. And then I would sit across the table from you and be like, hey, so if you wanted to like deposit a check in this banking app I'm making, what button would you click?
Yeah.
And then when you hit a button, I'd put that sheet of paper in front of you. And then, and I can like simulate the whole experience. Meanwhile, my cost is minimal. My change cost is like so minimal.
Yeah.
At this point, there's some apps that make that
particular process.
That one a little easy, but
interesting.
Still, like, so then you're building all these assets in a screen, and what should our font be, and what color, and how should our buttons look, and all this stuff. That's like, this is not the point. Anyway,
interesting.
Yeah. So I just like bias toward action. I don't know.
Yeah.
But optimized for learning.
Yeah. We have honestly been a little bit light on improvements. It feels like, or maybe our improvements have been just sort of a lot of in-process stuff, more so than like, we're going to take time out to do this little thing I've been thinking about.
Yeah.
We got our indicator lights in. They came with very short leads.
I saw that. It's annoying.
And so I haven't actually installed them, but I did make magnetic bases for them so I don't have to screw holes in all my machines. And
nice.
My thinking was that I'm not sure where the best visibility is going to be for everybody. So I wanted to be able to move them around.
That's smart.
And typically, I think if you buy one with a machine, it's just above the control.
Gotcha.
And I'm not sure that's going to be the best in our shop. So
right.
I wanted to have the option to move it easily. So I think we're just going to add a bunch of extra wire since it had so much.
You're adding wire anyway.
So, yeah. To anybody who does get into this, turns out that I think most of these come with 24 gauge wire, which is the same as Cat5 internet cable.
Interesting.
So if you have internet cable lying around,
that's good to know.
You can repurpose it. Or that's what I believe. I haven't actually done it yet.
Gotcha.
But I don't anticipate it being an issue. I think it's going to be fine.
Interesting. There was something I heard about Cat5, or the different standards of wires and the way they're twisted to deal with interference is different.
Yeah.
It's like, man, people are so clever.
They are. Yeah.
It's very impressive.
One other thing we did, it was just spending money is all it was. But one of our torque wrench, we keep a torque wrench at each machine. The newest machine didn't have one yet, so I needed to order one regardless. One of the old ones was broken, so we only had one functional torque wrench that we were always juggling around. So I bought 3 new Vera torque wrenches. Also found a great deal on Amazon.
Oh,
surprisingly, like
nice.
Half of list costs.
Jeez.
Yeah, I don't know how they do that.
Kind of odd.
Yeah. Hopefully they're not already broken or something.
Right. Which one did you get? The small one?
It's like a standard length. So yeah, I don't know, like 18-inch length or something. Okay. But I think it's 10 to 100 Newton meters, which is like 75 foot-pounds or maybe 80 foot-pounds max.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't remember the
Nice.
exact.
I have a
foot
bunch
count.
of smaller ones. But
Yeah. I do want to get a smaller one specifically for setting pull stud torque.
yeah.
We have a torque wrench, but it's like for that, but it's like at the very low end of the range. And I'm the kind of like, is this actually reliable? I'm not exactly sure. This one is kind of a bigger, I need to figure out a way to document this, but so the way we have our machines are all networked. Well, the lathe's not networked, but the mills are all networked via Wi-Fi.
Mm-hmm.
I have the ability to connect to all of them through directly from my computer.
Okay.
The issue with that is it circumvents running the code through a place where it's going to be accessible for future jobs, and knowing which one is correct.
And like the latest version.
The latest version. Yeah. So I have in the past gotten frustrated with the time. It's cloud-based. So I'll be like, delete the old one, upload the new one. It takes a minute for it to show up. I walk over to the other machine and stand there and wait for it to show up again, then download it onto the computer at that machine, then loaded it into the mill or whatever the case may be.
This feels like you could maybe write a custom app that pushes it to both or something.
Interesting. Maybe.
It's not a cheap way of doing it.
What's not a cheap way of doing it?
Writing a custom app, unless you use ChatGPT to write a custom app.
Yeah, potentially.
Interesting. Yeah, so I guess like
well, so my short-term solution is this last week I was just like, no more. I will do it this way every time regardless. Initially I was like, God, this is going to be frustrating. What I'm realizing that might be an upside is it's going to force me to be a lot more on my game with making sure that my code is good the first time around.
Yeah.
So I don't have to keep doing this because it is annoying. Similar to kind of like the one piece flow highlighting issues. So I think that's kind of beneficial in a certain sense.
Thinking about your yellow marker on the cycle start button on the CNC that you posted about. I think we shared it to incremental CI as well. What would happen? Because I'm also thinking like when I'm doing new code, it is nice to keep pushing updates, to like push an update, try it, see it, do your next one instead of like batching them. What would happen if one part of like you're doing your setup, you can push direct, but then to switch from yellow to a green ring, like the last step is always sending that code, even if it's no changes, sending that code through the ERP. Mm-hmm. Like, could there be a system where you allow yourself both mechanisms of like a quick, we are still in prototyping phase.
Yeah.
And then but like knowing, because I think the challenge, and this relates more broadly to any version control struggle, I think the challenge is like the second you lose confidence that it is the latest one, you spend there's a lot of waste that sneaks in because you have doubt, right? The next time you go to run something, you're like, did I send it? Is this the correct one? Then you go back to the computer, look at all the tool paths.
Maybe you just repost it all.
Yeah.
Just to be sure.
Just to be double sure. Yeah. So I don't know. Or maybe you just stick to a consistent.
I think that's definitely a possibility. It relies on, again, really good standard operating procedure.
Yeah.
And me following it. Yes. Specifically myself. Whereas I do feel like the other way, being a little less efficient, is more fail safe for the realities of interruptions and stuff. Mm-hmm. But I think that is a good thing to keep in mind as a possibility moving forward.
Standardize the
handoff to this is a good program and a good process, I guess, ready to run. At the moment, I do kind of like that it is forcing me to streamline some of my other aspects.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
And it's really motivating to get all of my post edits finished up, which are still hanging.
Oh, nice.
And then, just being really on the ball with every step instead of being like, it doesn't matter, I'll just try it and then come back and do it again in a minute.
Right. So this is actually reminding me of something we've been talking about in my shop a bit, which is moving more in a direction of every day is actually a test of SOPs rather than it being about production, which is obviously incorrect because we're in the business
of making things.
But I really think it's important and want to move in the direction of building SOPs and then building a culture where we absolutely adhere to SOPs so that we can change them, right? Like we stick to them so that it's like, man, I've done it 10 times this way. It's kind of not great.
Yeah.
And I understand why we do it this way. Like that's the other risk is I think as you improve systems, some of the ways you end up doing work, like someone could come along when you train someone, you're like, you always send it to the ERP and then you send it to the machine from the ERP. And then they might look at that and be like, it is so much faster to just send it direct. And then they send it direct and then someone crashes a machine because it's not the most recent code. And then they're like, oh, that's why you train me this way. Right. So like, I think building a culture where everyone has a lot of buy-in and like faith in the SOPs, and also building in a system to like almost like a change log. So this idea, so I think we're sort of still talking about it, and it's a big system to figure out what the best approach is or what the best next step is to learn about the best approach. But basically, we have an SOP that's sort of a memory tool, right? Make sure you don't skip a step, but it's assuming a level of expertise on the part of the user. But then there should be a backup document that is more nitty gritty. Maybe it's more of a training document, but maybe it's also a training document slash like here's how to do each of those steps, but then also here's why we do each of those steps.
Mm-hmm.
And just building a really nice mechanism for tracking all of that and updating it. I don't know. It's something we've been talking about, like right now we are moving in a direction of tribal knowledge, which is not what I want.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't allow for enough improvements, because everyone can be doing it differently and no one really knows, because anyway, it just makes a lot of things worse. So like, I don't know. It's something I've been thinking about.
Interesting. Should I finish up mine?
Either way. All right. Yeah.
We have a little fiber laser marker.
Yep.
The software that came with it is ubiquitous.
Okay.
But also maybe terrible. And it's been a big struggle all along. And sometimes it's fine, and then occasionally it's just the issue it has is like it's very picky about file import. Okay. And when it doesn't like it, it just crashes your machine.
Oh God. Like the whole computer, not like
actually I haven't done it personally, so I'm not sure. But
it's not great.
At the very least, the program crashes. Damn. I think occasionally the machine crashes. Computer, not CNC machine.
Right.
So anyway, we had this rush job this last week. It did not like the file we were provided by the customer. It got to the point where Ariel had to like essentially remake the file, the image in the software. Luckily, it was just like text and like a ruler kind of thing, but it was a little bit complicated. And so that was kind of the last straw. So we downloaded this new software called Lightburn.
I've heard of it.
Which people are talking about. We haven't actually purchased it yet, but I think that's going to be. She sort of like dove into it and then was like, this has to get done. I'm not going to be able to learn this software in the amount of time we have to get this done. So I'm going to go back to doing it the way it was. But that's going to be hopefully a big improvement and just make that whole process a lot more straightforward, because it's been like a real pulling hair situation sometimes. Nice. And then it's a small thing, but we've been, running these, this one part or this one family of parts for several weeks now, or a handful of weeks. We will be running them for several weeks. And there were some early issues with my approach, destroyed a expensive tool. Anyway, so going through it, I've been trying to like, instead of treat it as like this is running, don't mess with it, be like, okay, let's make improvements as we go.
Interesting.
So we've been changing up strategy every time we have a little issue. At this last week, there's these little, like it comes out of a square plate. It's a round part. Yep. And we do most of the work on the backside and then flip it over. And when instead of roughing the whole thing, we just like zip those corners off. Okay. on the second size part, it was slightly smaller. So the corners didn't come off individually. They came off as one,
like a ring,
as sort of a ring with a split where the tool entered.
Right.
And it was like mostly fine. And then every once in a while, a tool would like clip it on its entry. And finally I was like, this is not good. It's scrapping parts. It's destroying an expensive tool. So added a little tool path where it comes and like zips the corner, or zips the like narrow
parts
spot
it off
apart prior. And then we part it with a cheap tool.
Oh, nice.
So they zip off. And if they break, it's not the end of the world. Or if it breaks, it's not the end of the world. And then come back with the nice tool to actually do the finishing pass to size and to get a good finish.
And how do you think about like quality control? Like I know on like my understanding is that on like aerospace parts, once you get a part through
frozen process
approval, it's all frozen. How do you think about, obviously these are not aerospace parts, but there's still, what I've seen is there's still a risk every time you make a change of not noticing a new issue it causes.
Yeah.
And then you run a bunch of parts like that.
Yeah.
Have you thought of, I'm sure you have, but like, what are your thoughts on sort of like that process of making changes? Like, do you just try to check really carefully, or do you try to like game out, okay, what could the potential, do you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, I think the difference there is maybe in an aerospace process. Well, I've never worked in a shop, so I don't know what I'm talking about.
Okay.
My impression is, my impression would be that like you can't make changes just because. And similarly, we tend to not make changes just because it would be it to solve an existing problem.
Sure. But so I don't know if the QC error would,
it doesn't go away.
Be comforted by the fact that at least there was a reason.
No, I think it doesn't. That's still something to keep in mind for sure. Yeah, I think at the moment it does just fall on good QC.
Yeah. And do you do like more QC after you've made a change?
I think it really depends on the kind of a part
and the kind of a change, I guess.
And the kind of a change.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like in this particular instance.
And then does it inform how you originally proof out the part in trying to surface more of those problems in a different phase of the project? Or
how do you mean?
Well, I could imagine trying to get to a higher level of refinement before you're like quote unquote done programming the job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or like a checklist of thinking through problems that might surface some of those, like starting to build tools where they aren't problems.
Uh-huh.
I don't know. I'm just trying to think like, how you could.
It'd be good to have more structure there. It's definitely a gut sense right now of like, I've put in this much time. The parts are coming off clean. That's
great.
Let's get going. And like this was a particular instance where I was like, I knew this might be a thing we'd have to tackle.
Interesting.
And I was kind of like rolling the dice a little bit and being like, let's see if it's actually a thing or if I just am being overly cautious.
Are you dropping those corners just off into the chip bin essentially? Like they just wash out the back of the machine?
Yeah. Most of them just hang on the table actually, but
gotcha. Okay.
Let me grab them.
Because I just made a change to our programmed op to not machine off all that stock to just kind of drops it in the cabinet.
Oh.
And I was just kind of curious how people, like I'm making such small parts. I can just so see how it just makes my life so much easier. Like if I drop my like raw blanks in the machine, like it's not going to jam in a way cover. It's not going to like get pushed through the front of the machine.
Yeah.
Right.
I have had bad things happen in the past. In a couple instances. I don't think like it's definitely not my go-to method.
Yeah.
Like turning it to chips in a controlled manner is preferable from a process reliability standpoint.
Right. I guess if you were running overnight, would you drop these?
I don't know. So this is on the R450.
So you get to like look at it every time.
The table's not moving around. Like it's just
true.
In the same way.
Yeah.
And there's not
right. There's much less risk of it kind of getting blown through the side of the machine.
There's a lot less risk. Yeah.
Interesting.
The one thing I would say is that like, so I've had one time where a part jammed on a weight cover. That's a bummer. Still has a dent.
And also still runs.
It still runs. Yeah. The bigger issue often is like tool breakage.
Yeah.
So like,
Right.
I've found that in that part off moment when the part's kind of loose, you'll often lose a corner of a flute on an end mill.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think it's a little bit of a balancing act. It's not my preferred method. In this particular instance, I could have added more hold downs to the corners.
Okay.
So that they got parted off, like not removing all that material, but they weren't loose. I think that would be the preferred method.
Yeah.
I just didn't do it.
Nice.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So some of the ones we've gone through. So this was thanks to you, but actually putting weights into our website across all products. So now and it's kind of interesting. Saves a lot of time.
Yeah.
So that was big. So thanks for the push on that. But the other cool thing is now it gives you an indication of if you missed something or if you put something in that's incorrect. Unfortunately, the different color webbings don't weigh different amounts.
Oh, yeah.
So you can still make that mistake, but it still could catch theoretically. I don't think it has yet, but because you still put it on the scale.
You do physically still put on the scale.
Which I guess we could stop at this point. That is extra. Is it extra movement? It's not currently extra movement, but it actually should be.
Huh.
I think we should move the barcode scanner because right now the barcode scanner is right next to the scale. So I still move it over there, scan it. So now that I'm thinking about it, we could probably re-look at that now that that's not an essential step. And that was actually a good example of standardizing like a portion because like 90% of our packages fall into one like envelope type and all that. So we just built a standard workflow around that.
Yeah.
And now the other stuff is going to all be custom instead of every bit of it being custom. And if we had tried to build a system that accounted for all of the options, it would have taken us a lot more time.
Yeah.
And I don't really know how we would do it. Exactly. So this was a super easy fix that is improves like, 80-90% of our work.
Yeah.
So that was great. And actually didn't take that long once I was just like, all right, we're doing this. And we got to use our thanks to Seating Matters, inspired by Seating Matters, we got a Stream Deck.
I don't know what that is.
It's a pretty cool piece of hardware that's used. So it's designed for like podcasting and live streaming.
Okay.
So it lets you sort of program. There are a bunch of LCD buttons that you can program in a pretty easy to use software to do different things. But then because they're each an LCD button, you can have it display whatever you want on that button.
Okay.
And so it's just this big interface that's hard coded. And so like when I was going through and putting in the weights, I very quickly programmed in the different buttons to represent different products. So then when I was moving through, I didn't have to keep copy and pasting different numbers. I could just like hit those buttons. So that was nice. We have them now. We haven't, it's not saving us a ton of time at the moment. I think there's a lot more there that we can do, but it was fun. It was like sort of an impetus to get it out of the box and actually set it up and download the software, and had this weird glitch where we had to download a different package because in the background it downloads some other like updates to some subsystems. I don't know. It was kind of weird, but it did work. So that was one. And then along with that, and this was cool because I didn't make this improvement.
Yeah.
Gotta love that. So I was going through doing those weights and I was like, wait a second. Anyway, so Sam had gone through the website and kind of automated some other stuff. So when I trained him, I told him to add shipping insurance above a certain value. So then every time you had to remember to click this drop down, select the thing, enter the right number. Turns out there's very simple automation to just say above this dollar amount, add this insurance. So he got that plugged in. So that's really nice.
Interesting.
And it's sort of funny because like, I don't know, it's kind of a reminder, like if there's these recurring tasks, I don't know. I feel like there should almost be a flag for this of like, if there's a recurring task, it doesn't feel like waste because I am achieving a thing that has to happen.
Sure.
And so I'm not sure that like screening for like 8 lean wastes doesn't really help you because it's like, no, I do need to do that. And so it doesn't fall into that category. It just turns out that there's...
Well, it's in the incidental, right? Sort of.
Well, it's not value add
Yeah.
to the customer.
Right.
So in that sense, like it's non-value add. So maybe that's the filter where I should have caught it.
Uh-huh.
But I just feel like there's a lot of stuff that is recurring that I just feel like those things should be automatically a higher degree of scrutiny in my head.
Mm-hmm.
Like things that we do every single day over and over and over. I wonder if I should just like do an audit from time to time of kind of being like, are there faster ways? Like, what are 5 faster ways I could think about doing this? Or
Yeah.
I don't know. Or just instead of waiting for there to be issues, there's also like being proactive about achieving higher degrees of efficiency on things you're doing all the time.
Yeah.
I don't know. So it was kind of interesting there. So we've been updating this QC form. I think I've mentioned a few. So we keep making updates. Our last one was just, there was a logical thing we were doing with this last question of the QC, which was basically, are there any like new types of rejects? So we divide our rejects into different types so that we can sort of pursue them and eliminate them. And then we added a question like, you know, if you see anything else, but it's an optional question.
Yeah.
And so we made it sort of an optional data entry point. And what we quickly realized through user testing, was that actually just that required training, right? Because instead of teaching like you have a question, you scan a thing. You have another question, you scan a thing. This was, well, you have a question. Now you can either scan this or type on the keyboard or scan this other thing. And so just we changed it so it's just a consistent interaction with every single question.
So you always scan?
Always scan.
Yeah.
And that was sort of simpler than making it optional. It's like, no, it's mandatory.
Yeah.
And so now you don't have to think about a different.
And so is it just a yes or no
workflow? We're still working on it. Ideally, it will be a 0 or type option, right?
And type being just like one of
type on the keyboard, describe what
gotcha.
Like what is the new error look like and how many, and
interesting.
We don't have them typically. The categories we have capture, I would say, we had one recently actually, which was interesting. It was parts came out discolored, but only on the bottom of each rack. And I think what it is that the fan in our oven turns off on the same timer that the oven does. And I'm guessing the coil was hot when it turned off. And so there was just a lot of radiated heat that was not evenly distributed by the fan. And so I think that's what happened, is it overheated the parts that were closest to it. Interestingly, again, we've been doing this for like coming up on 2 years and
never
had that. I saw it in the oven that we were using previously, which is why we switched ovens, because that didn't have enough circulation. And so that's why I recognized it. I was like, I'm guessing this is what it is. I still don't have I'm not positive, but
yeah. Are you seeing strong trends in your quality? Like your defects, I guess I should say.
I would say at any given point, yes. And it's definitely been very helpful to categorize them. So we were having a lot of machining rejects, and those fell into a few categories. And so it was easy to go through and be like, oh, a lot of these are this problem. And so we actually recently solved that problem, which I'll talk about. The specs, similarly, we had a series of events during the winter that was giving us a lot of specs.
Like specs
in the paint.
Yeah.
Could not figure out what it was. Did I talk to you about this?
So I think you mentioned it, but I don't know if we got
kind
to
of
the
funny
solution
actually.
point.
Yeah, so we were having really bad reject rates, and we had this last winter too, and it was incredibly frustrating. And I was on the phone with the paint manufacturer, like, is it cold air that's leading to condensation? And these are water, whatever, on and on and on. Then this winter, we upgraded our paint booth, and the problems got really bad.
Not what you want.
Not what you want. So what it turns out to be, I believe, is in the winter, you have drier skin.
Oh, interesting.
And so,
wow, that's gross.
Yeah, kind of gross. And slightly embarrassing. But so what we did is basically now I got a balaclava, which helps a lot, and do a lot of blowing off before we start paint, and that has virtually eliminated the problem.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so I think the funny thing is it's all these added variables. Like, this is why science tries to change one variable at a time.
Yeah.
The winter I think led to more dryness. And then the upgrade in our paint booth has a lot higher CFM. So it's just pulling a lot more air past you.
Yeah.
Now that in finding the answer to this problem, I do remember I talked to someone about paint, and I was asking him about issues he's had and solutions they came up with. And one of the things he mentioned was a side draft paint booth, which makes a lot of sense to me now. I was kind of like, that makes no sense. I don't understand that at all. But you're pulling all this air past the operator, past your wet part.
Yeah.
So like if you have any dust on you, wherever that dust comes from, a good chance it's going to hit your part.
Interesting.
Yeah. So another reason to move to a robot. I don't have skin.
Speaking of, do you want to share anything about your tests with your your spinny deal?
Yeah. So that was another big
I was looking at the photo. Was that an air gear motor that you're using to spin it?
No. Inspired by Robin Renzetti, I bought a Harbor Freight angle drill.
Okay.
And took it out of its casing.
Gotcha. So kind of yes, but not air.
Yeah. So basically put that on a lab stand. So we're trying to move to automated paint. And the big question there, once you have a 6-axis robot, is not can you make the motions to get good coverage, but what are the motions that you need to get good coverage? And then more importantly to me, so the big struggle that Toyota has with automation is around, two, I guess. One is flexibility, and the other is what do you do when that line is idle because they can't make improvements, right? So investing in robots, if you don't have work for them. Anyway, so I kind of wanted to know what set of motions we would need to get good coverage and whether the same set of motions would achieve good coverage across all our parts.
Yeah.
And it just kept nagging at me. I'd done a test about 8 months ago. That was a very similar test, but I just kept like feeling like I hadn't done enough of those. I ran like 5 parts and I was like, holy shit, these are all good. Like, bam, it's a go.
Yeah.
I was like,
and then that was 5 months ago.
Maybe I should revisit this and just do a few more. And definitely learning a lot about like, as you spin a part, there is a velocity that corresponds to its distance from the center of rotation.
Yeah.
And so on my bigger parts, on the 1-inch bodies, I was seeing issues. And I think I'm going to run another test where I reduce the speed of rotation so that it's not moving away from the paint gun. And I'm kind of curious about the relative. I was going to just do a back of the envelope kind of calculation of the speed of that part moving away from the paint relative to the theoretical velocity of the paint, because it's just like, I don't think that'll be too hard to get a sort of ballpark figure on. But so one thing I did is reverse the direction of rotation midway, right? So like so that I think will help, but I think my rate of rotation is a little high on those big parts. I kept sort of putting this off because it kept becoming a bigger and bigger project of like, we've talked about it. Like, do you machine a taper? Do you do a this? Do you do that? I kept avoiding 3D printed parts because I was like, the solvent is absolutely going to eat this stuff alive.
Yeah.
PLA. Then I was like, does it matter if it sort of melts a little bit? Because eventually it'll just be coated in like dry paint. So that'll shield it.
You're talking about the solvent in the paint?
Yeah. Anyway, so then I ended up using silicone plugs, which you can buy for like blocking off holes in powder coat and paint.
Yeah.
So I just took those, stuck our wire through them. It was like an hour to build this full prototype that lets me do 5 parts, do a quick change, bent some wire as a rack in the oven. I don't know. It's just so easy to start like refining a thing that does not need to be refined.
Oh, and those silicone plugs can go right into the oven.
Yeah.
Nice.
So it's high temp.
Yeah.
Doesn't require any precision to retain them because they're squishy. So I just like 3D printed similar-ish taper.
Yeah.
And it seems to work.
It is a taper.
Yeah, it is a taper.
Was it easy to get in and out? Like, how is that gonna?
Easy enough.
Yeah.
It's
Will
not.
You have just like a wine glass, like 2 things that they hang on or something, and then
exactly. Yeah. So I think I posted photos of the whole kind of prototype And it was just like super quick. And then I think I'm just going to run a bunch of tests on it. And honestly, like, I think I am going to move the rest of the project in parallel. And that is getting a robot and starting to think about how all of this stuff works together, because at this point, I'm pretty confident that I can do it.
Yeah.
But I think this tool in the meantime will let me learn more about how to do it. So I think it's still going to be pretty beneficial having that set up. Yeah, so that was a big one. And then my last one, which is interesting, we were having an issue, as I said, like a lot of machining rejects.
Mm-hmm.
And so in looking through that, basically it was that when we were so we have the automation on the mill, the spindle gripper, when it was placing a blank in the vise, when it opened, I think it was because of surface tension with the coolant, depending how much coolant was between the blank and the part. It was sort of pulling it off center different amounts.
Yeah.
And so every now and then, and by every now and then, I mean like normally 1 or 2 in 40. So not
that's a pretty high percentage.
Yeah. I guess 4 would be 10%. So we were around like 2.5 to 5%.
That's a pretty high reject rate.
Yeah. Kind of brutal, especially because it's the first step in a chain that also has rejects. So once it got to that point, we were like, all right, got to fix this. So we kind of looked at a bunch of different options. And the one we settled on is basically we place the part on the vise, we open the gripper, we turn it 90 degrees, and then we sort of just do a feed move to nudge the blank to ensure that the blank is centered.
That assumes that it moves
it was reliably moving in one direction.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. I think because the jaws on the other side don't have as much surface area. So I think the coolant wasn't it didn't have as much pull there.
I guess you could also place it purposefully off center.
Yeah.
In one direction and then push it to
nudge
center.
it back to center. And then once we had that, we started looking at, so that was on our 3/4 inch
so you obviously you drop it, retract, move over, turn. You're not just turning in place.
I come up in Z.
Yeah.
So I open the gripper, come up in Z till the bottom of the finger clears the part.
Yeah.
Rotate 90, come back down, feed with it in the open position.
Oh, with the inside of the jaw.
Yeah.
I was imagining the outside of the jaw.
Yeah. So just come
finger
up
for some reason.
Yeah. I think either one would do the trick. And so then we were having a similar issue on our 3/4 inch body. We were having 2 issues. One, it started dropping every now and then. It would drop apart. And this is out of 24. So 1 in 24 is pretty bad.
Uh-huh.
Then it was like 2. Then it was reliably 1 in 24. And then sometimes 2 in 24. And at that point, I was like, okay, this is pretty frustrating for 2 reasons. One is it's rejects, it's wasted time on our mill. The other thing is now we have this collection of half machined parts that are fully good. It's just we don't have a workflow to load them into the auto. So now I theoretically am going to do it, but they've just been accumulating.
They should just go in the scrap bin.
That's probably true. Anyway, so pretty frustrating. So once we had programmed that for the 3/4 inch cam, we applied the same thing to the 3/4 inch body. And it was dropping for 2 reasons. One is it wasn't loading back into the vise after the flip station properly. And then the other reason, because I finally just watched a cycle, which is an hour long, so it's a bit tedious.
Yeah.
One was that, and then it would not load properly, so it wouldn't be clamped, and then it would tip up to 90 and just first drop.
Yeah.
And then the other reason was that when the gripper came back down to pick it out of the flip station, it would drop. It just wouldn't pick it up.
Huh.
And both of those reasons were because the person who cut our stock previously always cut them oversized. And our current supplier, who is you,
who is me,
Devin has an auto saw, so cuts it like right on. The saw is like bang on the money, and so it's about 0.1 inches less than our previous supplier. And so we had cut our trays oversized to accommodate that oversized stock, and so now there's a lot of play in the part in the tray. And so then when the gripper comes and picks the part out of the tray, there's uncertainty, then it loads it into the vise and there's uncertainty.
Is it also just that the fingers are like the space between them is on the wide side, so like you're at the very end of your grip range?
Yes. And so we modified that, and then so then we were sort of like, okay, how do we fix this problem? Do we make new trays so that there's less slop? Do we talk to our supplier. No, no. I mean, you've been super consistent. It's just that they were super consistent at one end of this massive tolerance, and you're at the other end. So, which is interesting thing about tolerancing and suppliers, because the other option would be to up our tolerance reduce like our tolerance for error, which would mean that if we did that as a solution, it would really limit us to just working with you essentially.
Or you have two sets of trays and you just have like
or some movable element in the tray that just gets set. I don't know. So there were a bunch of options. What we decided is that pushing it back to center would achieve the highest degree of precision. And so what's interesting here, we are going to modify our tray, but we also did this feed to center because I think the next step is going to be to drastically reduce the size of our blanks. And then if we have the precision to place them really carefully, we will eliminate. We just did a rough calculation that we can eliminate about 1/8 of an inch off of every blank.
Yeah.
Which means we will, in a bar of aluminum, which is 12 feet long, we will save 14 inches of aluminum.
Yeah. It starts to add up.
Which, imagining sticking a 14-inch bar in the mill and just roughing it like to nothing, just to waste. That's essentially what we're doing.
Yeah.
So that will improve our, there's cost savings. There's, less wasted aluminum, and then there's also less labor scooping aluminum chips out the back. There's less space they'll take up in the shop before we take them to the recycling. So it's just like a huge,
very small amount of machine time reduction.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Yeah.
There's also, so it seems like the feed move is probably the fastest to center, but you could also probe.
True. Yeah. The feed move is very fast and fairly reliable.
Yeah.
So far. So yeah, that's been working really well. I think dropping off center and then pushing to center is a nice idea. But so far it's just worked as is. So the two failure modes that I mentioned, one was not loading to the vise properly, and the other one was just dropping. One was if it placed it slightly off center, then the part was not registered to the hat.
Yeah.
So then when it went to put it back in the vise, it was slightly off, and so it would miss. And then if it was fully off center, the part was just too small for the gripper to grab.
After it was cut.
After it was cut, flip station could grab it, but then the gripper couldn't grab it again. And so then it would drop. So
interesting.
Yeah. So we've fixed all that, and we've achieved a degree of precision and reliability that I think will let us get further savings in materials, which is exciting.
Yeah.
Anyway. Yeah.
It is funny how it's these little details.
Yeah, but it's so easy to just it's been an issue for a long time, and it was sort of a very small issue, so we kind of ignored it, and then finally it was like a bigger issue.
Yeah.
And we tackled it, and it's, it's not inconsequential once you do it, and it's easy to become, I feel like with all this, it's just easy to become used to your surroundings, kind of.
Yeah.
You become habituated to like, this is how we do it. Yeah, that can happen. It's not,
I think putting percentages on it is helpful too, because it's really easy to be like, that was one part.
Yeah, especially with my parts, because they're so small.
And then you put the math on it, and you're like, 5% reject rate.
And then you punch that into your cost of goods. You just add 5% to your cost of goods, and you're like, that's not great.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
interesting. Cool. Well, I think that about wraps us up for today.
Yeah.
Thank you all for listening, as usual.
Yep. You can find us on Instagram at Incremental CI. Please send any improvements you make around the shop. Tag us. We'll share them. We can all kind of see what everyone's doing and get cool ideas from each other on all these like very often very easy, often very obvious once you see them improvements. So we can all become more efficient.
You can find me at Lycan_MFG.
And you can find me at austere_manufacturing, also on Instagram. And thanks for listening.
Yeah. Let us know what you think about this alternative format, and we'll see you soon.